Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube, where you can join us in both portrait and landscape format. This weekend, we lived through one of those rare moments where the world changes and you can feel it happening moment by moment. Things truly are different from where they were 1 week ago, and they're continuing to evolve very rapidly. There are rumors flying out of the White House about more changes coming, even on top of deploying border czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis, firing top Border Patrol official Greg Bovino, and sidelining Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and her side piece, Corey Lewandowski. So today, we're going to look at how everything has shifted, what changed in real time inside Congress and among voters and in the media and even among Republicans, and where all of that could take us next. So I'm taking the very unusual step of welcoming back my guest from last week, our congressional insider, Ryan McConaghy, who used to lead the Senate Democratic Policy and Communications Center, to walk us through the massive change that occurred in a few days after our live stream last Tuesday. And then I'm going to bring in former Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Tribune editor Mark Jacob to talk about the media coverage of Minneapolis and Saturday's murder of Alex Pretti, what the media did right, what they failed at, the role they played in driving public perceptions, and where all of that's going. But before we bring Ryan and Mark into the conversation, I want to point out three things that the paramilitary incursion of ICE in Minnesota and the murders of Renee Good and Alex Pretti are not. They are not avoidable, they are not transferable, and they are not over. Let me unpack that. Not avoidable. If you look at the coverage of all of the tragedies that have happened in Minnesota and in all of the places that ICE has been sent, you hear this word, avoidable. That's usually brought up by law enforcement experts in the context of explaining the mistakes that poorly trained agents are making that lead to tragic and violent consequences. To be clear, I understand what they're saying. They're saying that the fault rests with ICE. They're saying they made mistakes. But while that's true, while they are at fault, it's the wrong conclusion to then say that these tragedies are avoidable. These tragedies are the opposite. They are inevitable. They are the inevitable consequence of terrible and intentional decisions by the people in charge, by politicians, by ideologues who put that ideology above common sense. We see this over and over again in politics and in government, even when people have the best intentions. Now, let me tell you a story. People who know me well or have been longtime viewers may have heard this. In my graduate school course on policy design at Harvard, our professor, Bob Blackwell, a veteran of President George H.W. Bush's National Security Council, asked who among us would have advised then President Bill Clinton to send U.S. troops into Rwanda to quell the 1994 genocide. Now, among our group of eager, mostly liberal Harvard students, virtually every hand shot up. Okay, he said, I love movies. I'm kind of a movie guy, so play the movie for me. What would the troops be doing? Peacekeeping, said a student. Okay, he said, but play the movie. What does that look like? For example, are our troops confiscating weapons? Are they trying to disarm violent factions? Yes, another student replied. Good. So play the movie, he said. Does that mean U.S. troops are going door to door to locate weapons? Yes, the student answered. Okay, he said, many of the weapons used in the genocide were machetes or other farm implements. So you'd be taking those away? Uncertainty. Rwanda is a country the size of New Jersey, he continued. Much of the population and the ethnic violence was concentrated in villages. You'd need enough troops to cover all of it. So the plan here, if I'm understanding you right, would be to send in tens of thousands of U.S. troops door to door to confiscate anything that could be used for violence, including the tools people need for their livelihoods. Dead silence. And he said, look, I'm not telling you that the answer to send in troops is wrong, but I am telling you that when policy doesn't work, it's usually because people didn't walk through the visual of what every step looks like first. They didn't play that movie. Now, Professor Blackwell said this to us in 1999. That was 4 years before our invasion of Iraq, where it became crystal clear that we had no real plan, certainly not at a detailed level, for what we were going to do next. The point is that you can have the best of intentions, like I think we all did about the Rwandan genocide, or you can respond to emergencies and find yourself in a situation that's difficult to deal with or get out of, like we did in Afghanistan. Or you can enter wars of choice like we did in Iraq. that turn into utter fiascos when your ideological aims get mixed with billions and billions of dollars, and you throw it all vaguely in a direction and hope that everything will just kind of work out the way you want. What's happening now with the Trump administration's ICE paramilitary operations isn't even at the level of planning and foresight of Iraq. So don't say the tragedies like the murders of Renee Good and Alex Pretti are avoidable. Because when you go on a hiring spree, funded by tens of billions of dollars, focused mostly on people who would not meet the standards to be hired by legitimate law enforcement, focused mostly on MMA viewers and first-person shooter video gamers, and then you give them guns and 2 months of training and tell them, go in there and bust heads and meet quotas. Tragedy is not avoidable. It is inevitable. Which brings me to point number 2. Everything about this is not transferable. 2 weeks ago, I suggested in an article on Substack, if the big White House meeting with oil executives, the one that was such an utter disaster for Trump, just complete humiliation, putting a president in cognitive decline with little preparation on camera, live with some of the richest and most powerful people in the world, for him to mumble incoherently and make basic mistakes and wander away to the window and be told to his face that everything he was saying was an insane fantasy. If that had happened in any other administration in history, there would have been house cleaning, at the very least, in order to try to protect the president by casting all the blame on staff. I could take you through any number of historical examples of the making the people who work for the person in charge the scapegoats when there's a major mistake, let alone a disaster. One of the significant things that's changed in the past few days is for the first time in this second Trump administration, there is an attempt to make others take the fall for Trump. That's what firing Bovino is about. That's what these rumors about firing Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski are about. Trial balloons to see how the right wing will react, how the media will react. Can someone else be made to take the political hit? So let's be crystal clear about something. The blame for all of this is not transferable. This is Donald Trump's fault. I wrote about this in Newsweek and I reprinted it on Worth Knowing early in November, an article titled, "All the President's Radical Men." I pointed out that the Trump presidency has become a platform, a plug and play for a motley assortment of militants with bizarre individual axes to grind who would never even sniff this amount of power in any other government. I argued that Trump doesn't run an administration so much as he hosts one. He has no durable policy objectives or vision. So as long as users pay the entry fee in the form of furthering the flattery, money, and vengeance for which he endlessly lusts, they can do what they want. And it's in that vein that he's empowered some of the most radical and obviously mentally ill figures in American public life. People like Russell Vought, who's a self-described Christian nationalist and a far-right fanatic, with a history of shocking even Trump administration officials with his extreme ideas for eviscerating the federal government. People like RFK Jr., who's a noted conspiracy theorist, who doesn't believe in germ theory and yet is put in charge of Americans' health. People like senior counselor for trade and manufacturing Pete Navarro, who conservative economists like Larry Kudlow think is an idiot because he has fundamental misunderstandings of economics. He's in charge of tariffs. And yes, this includes advisor Stephen Miller, who's described by former Senate colleagues as a fringe figure, ideological and a bit scary. A former White House colleague said he's a horrible human being, someone who has gone all in down the rabbit hole on extremism. When you turn your presidency into a platform for these kinds of extremists, you get extreme disasters. So as they try to shift the blame, transfer the blame onto other people, don't buy it. This is Trump's fault. Finally, point number 3, this is not over. Now, it's a good thing, maybe, to send Tom Homan in and get rid of Bovino, replacing a violent cosplaying MAGA nut job with a slightly more experienced and somewhat more rational person like Homan. It's, of course, a step in the right direction. Make no mistake, Homan's no angel. He's the original author of the family separation policy and a co-author of Project 2025. And there does appear to be some movement, which we'll hear about from Ryan in a moment, on putting some controls on ICE. That would, of course, be important. We should continue to push for that. But that doesn't mean we just move on from the president of the United States unleashing a violent paramilitary on America, especially when there's so much evidence that he did it as part of an extortion scheme aimed at his political enemies and to try to secure voter registration information from Minnesota. I'll be writing more about this, but suffice it to say that for Donald Trump, everything is television. He thinks in terms of episodes of television. He's only acting now because this most recent episode is getting him terrible ratings. We'll talk more about this with Mark later. But the timeline strongly suggests that getting criticism by Fox hosts on TV is what finally moved him. So, of course, his brain is already cooking up the next episode of television, the next outrage to refocus our attention. So we might get through this crisis. We might just manage to turn the horrible tragedy of all of the violence and injury and destruction and murder in Minnesota into something meaningful if it reins in what Trump is doing through his personal ICE militia. But that won't mean it's over. In the wake of tragedy, we've seen some rapid progress and change. We should feel fortified by that. But we still have a lot more to do. So for now, let's focus on the major change that occurred and talk a little bit about where things are going by bringing in Ryan McConaghy. Well, this is a worth knowing live stream first. I have never yet had weekly back-to-back guests, but you merit it. It's important. And, what I want to tee up for you is kind of like that starting question. When you were here a week ago, and I got to warn you right now that you're muted. So you're about to say something brilliant and insightful. And I just want to warn you about that. When we were here a week ago, we laid out the options, what Democrats could do, what the pros and cons were, what was likely to happen. This wasn't so much prescriptive as descriptive. Just wanted to lay out what was likely, what the trade-offs were. And then everything changed on Saturday. And you were one of the people who reached out to me to say, look out, things are moving fast. So maybe you could walk us through what happened over the weekend, what the conversation was like behind the scenes in Washington, where you're so plugged in, and why things moved so rapidly and so far.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Not the best circumstances to make history on the back-to-back guest front for, but I'm certainly glad we have a chance to talk this out and kind of walk the audience through it. So I think let's go back to Friday and not Saturday. So on Friday, I think we were still in a position where Democrats were going to pass the funding bill. They had gotten some reforms into the DHS approach bill. And fundamentally, we're still in a place where the pressure was building and, it was going to be a close vote. So we were teetering. I think it was going to be, in the low 60s. It wasn't going to be a ton of Democratic support, but you had a sense that ICE fund was untouchable because they did that in the reconciliation bill. So the you weren't going to be able to defund ICE in an appropriations bill, and that immigration is still an area where Democrats have not set themselves up to win that issue at this time, but you saw it was Renee Good. It was the constant stream of incidents coming out of Minneapolis. The pressure was amping up. So it was going to be a close vote, but a likely vote. And then Saturday happens. And I think there are really kind of three things about what happened Saturday that made it different. I mean, the first was that it's the compounding effect. I mean, obviously the killing of Renee Good was a terrible thing. And I think we all saw that. But a second shooting means that that's no longer an aberration. If there's a second, there can very easily be a third, and there's a compounding effect to the tragedy. I think the second thing is this was very clear video that disseminated over the internet immediately on Saturday, and you walked through sort of what the video shows and what the incident shows, but it was a very clear American exercising First Amendment rights, later exercising Second Amendment rights. And when you have that, you find out that this is a VA ICU nurse, the profile of that is really crystallizing. And then, I think the third thing, and this is really the cherry on top, and this is where you start to see Republicans even jumping off, is when you have people like Bovino and Noam immediately, and in direct contradiction to video that we can simultaneously see with our own eyes, calling this guy a domestic terrorist, saying he was there to do to conduct a massacre, when what he was really there for was to help a woman who had been knocked down and to record what was happening in his neighborhood. I think that created a perfect storm where when you already were teetering on the brink of Democrats feeling like they needed to do more, and then you have that perfect storm of escalation. It was almost immediate that, okay, the vote's not going to be there to move this bill forward. We need to figure out what's going on, with DHS. So I think where you see Democrats now, and the first point of this is Democrats are being very clear that they are not looking to quote unquote shut the government down. This is about reining in ICE. So the first thing that they want to do, and not to get a props wonky as I always do on these discussions, but there are 6 appropriations bills that are bundled together, and that's the Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Defense, Transportation. Right away, Democrats are saying, let's take 5 of these bills that we agree with and let's pass them right now. So let's fund the rest of the government while we work out the issues at DHS. So that's the first step. And then the second step is, what are the things that Democrats are going to be pushing for to reform and rein in ICE?
Just to read back to you, where we were a week ago was a sense that despite all of the horrible things, including but not limited to the murder of Renee Good, that had happened in Minnesota and elsewhere, the thinking among Democrats was that we will do more harm than good if this turns into an abolish ICE, a defund ICE, or a government shutdown fight. The thing that has fundamentally shifted over the last week and since Saturday's horror is the sense that actually we can, because what we're ultimately after is to rein in ICE. And as much as there's now polling shows that the idea of abolishing ICE has now become a 50-50 proposition in America. It is pretty evenly split. But even beyond that, the level of support for reining in ICE has gone to such a strong point. People are with us. So I want to ask you a really brass tacks question about this. As you're texting me, and other former colleagues from the Hill are texting me on Saturday, as things are shifting, and Lefty Gramps had a question earlier, what exactly has shifted? And I think what shifted is Democrats quickly coalesced, like in real time. This happened during the afternoon on Saturday, from we're not going to make this a fight about Department of Homeland Security funding to we fucking well are. And there seemed to be no debate about that. How much of that was pressure from our own base? How much of that was Democrats realizing that, much like they did around the government shutdown back in the fall, how much of that was Democrats just realizing this is where our party is. We have to make a stand on this. How much of it was their own kind of sense of conscience? What are you picking up from your contacts in congressional circles?
Well, I think it's always, first of all, it's never one thing, right? So it's a little bit of a mix of all those things. But I think if I was going to crystallize it or boil it down to one sentence, I think what happened on Saturday clearly and irrevocably moved this issue from being a debate about immigration policy to a debate about law and order, about the Constitution, about American civil rights, and about democracy. And that's a fight that Democrats think is worth risking something politically risky like a government shutdown, and also a fight that they can win. I think it now transcends immigration policy, and it's now about just fundamentally what is this country about, and is law enforcement going to also be accountable to the law? So I think that's really and that's the product of knowing that the base wants action, but also just this can't go on like this. And so it's a little from column A, a little from column B. But I think fundamentally it's that this is now transcended, potentially Democrats being politically weak on immigration to being strong on this is America and we're going to stand up for Americans' rights.
I think the suspicion, I'm going to put a cartoon up on screen here. Sorry for anyone whose use case for podcasts is they listen on audio while driving. If that's the case, hit pause before you look up, or hit pause on your driving before you look up. There is a perception captured in this political cartoon from the week that the way Democrats handle things like this is they try to come up with ultimately not that great sloganeering, like, how's this? Trump should stop killing citizens and start killing it on affordability. It's like trumped up trickle down economics. Great job, Hillary. And Hakeem responds by, I'll run it by the focus group immediately. And that very much corresponds to a comment here. If I can find it. See, I try to multitask too much.
You're doing a lot here. You're doing a lot.
I'm doing a lot of things. From MJ, who was saying, essentially Hakeem Jeffries is useless. Here we go. She was a little more pungent about it. MJ says Jeffries is a useless, feckless waste of space. What you're saying is, okay, point taken. There may have been some caution on the part of Democrats because we've seen this before. We've seen ourselves get beaten with the cudgel. That's a bad analogy to make in this context. We've seen this issue be weaponized against us and twisted successfully with some willing co-conspirators in the media and or Fox News. And so it has led to a little bit of caution. And you're saying that in this case, there was a combination of, the politics have genuinely changed, and we've hit the absolute limit of what we can we can no longer abide by any of this. Let's talk a little bit about the Republican side. I got the sense in some of our offline texts and some of my other exchanges, and some reporting that's emerged, that the other factor here is that Republicans are getting really, really uneasy. Not all of them, but to be clear, before people in the chat start like, no, they don't have I hear you. It's not all. But what we're seeing is Republican women are saying 35% now say ICE has been too aggressive. Only 33% say they've struck the right balance. We know who those 33% are. A majority of Catholic Americans, a slightly Republican-leaning group, this is Navigator polling out fresh this morning, believe ICE has been too aggressive. And you've seen statements from Republicans, including what we're going to bring up with Mark in a few minutes. Pressure from Fox News hosts, Maria Bartiromo, willing to kind of call bullshit on the administration. What are you picking up from inside Capitol Hill about how Republicans are feeling and how Democrats are reacting to that, and seeing that there is now a genuine fracture there?
Yeah, I think, again, and that the point about the immediate and it's two things that sort of are really bridges that may be too far for Republicans. One was the immediate and clearly non-factual attacks on the victim from Bovino and Nome, and the moves to interfere with the investigation. I think you're seeing a lot of Republicans who are raising concerns about this. That's one of the places they're going to, is we need the investigation, we need process, we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. I do think the fact that you had also gun ownership groups saying, hey, this administration is overstepping, these U.S. attorneys are overstepping, by saying that this guy just shouldn't have been walking around when he was a legal gun carrier in a concealed carry state. Where's the commitment to the Second Amendment that we were sold that you have? So I think that is not to be, I think, undersold in terms of what goes on in their base. And they're can
I read you a quote here?
Sure.
This is from the National Association for Gun Rights. I guess they had to rebrand themselves after the NRA/NAMBLA no longer worked for them. They said after the administration's rhetoric that Alex Pretti shouldn't be carrying a gun. Who has the right to carry a gun in America, we wonder. He said the FBI director, Kash Patel said this, needs to brush off that thing called the Constitution because he clearly hasn't read it. I know of no more crucial place to carry a firearm for self-defense than a protest. Look, we might quibble about that from a public safety standpoint, but that is definitely a shot across the bow, MAGA style.
Right. And so you're seeing, so you're seeing those pressures are really, And look, and Republicans see the numbers too. They see that overall that political dynamic that we entered this juncture with, the Republican edge overall, which by the way is still slightly, there's still some polling that shows Republicans slightly up on Democrats on immigration, not ICE conduct, but just generally immigration policy. But it's a gap that is almost evaporated. Both parties are down in the 30s, which is not a great place to be in terms of if you actually want to make immigration policy. But the overreach here is, these members are looking at 26. And if you're a Republican who's up for reelection, the economic polling is not looking good for you. Trump is out in Iowa today talking affordability, but going to have a rough ride. Immigration has been a place where you've been able to kind of stake out some high ground, and that high ground is now collapsing under your feet. So you're running out of room to maneuver here, and it may be time to say, hey, look, you are squandering an issue where we're strong through this massive overreach. Maybe step it back a bit.
Let's talk about where this is going next before I get you out of here and bring Mark in. There's a lot of action going on behind the scenes. I mean, the biggest thing is you see Trump scrambling in a way that you really have not seen in the past year, with the possible exception of the Liberation Day tariffs, where there was suddenly the Oval Office intervention where, Bessent was like, hey, buddy, you're about to melt down the world economy. Could you maybe back off a little bit? You really have not seen this level of panic from Trump. So as much as Caroline Leavitt has continued to blame Democratic leaders for Pretti's death, you have Trump saying, well, I had a constructive call with Tim Walz. He's conceded that ICE agents may have made a mistake in Renee Good's case. J.D. Vance has been backtracking a little bit, saying, well, it's not true that ICE agents have absolute immunity, since they don't. They have qualified immunity. They have this trial balloon currently floating through the media about maybe we will fire Kristi Noem. And then you've got people like Rand Paul saying, hey, how about putting the agents involved in killing Alex Pretti on administrative leave? How about that? That seems pretty straightforward. And Susan Collins is running around desperately trying to create something. She's in a tough reelection race. So she wants to claim credit for some kind of a step forward, some kind of a compromise here.
Well, and ICE is currently operating in Maine too.
So, right, exactly. Well, there is a robust Somali community in Lewiston, Maine. I used to work for the member of Congress who represents that district, Mike Michaud. So I know that community fairly well. So of course, ICE is there in force. Not asking for a crystal ball. I mean, goodness knows we couldn't have foreseen this weekend's events when we were having this conversation a week ago. But what's your sense as of today on where things are going next?
So I think, like I said, the first thing is Democrats are being very clear. Like this is about getting ICE under control. It's not about anything else. So let's get the other 5 bills. Let's get the government funded. Let's get healthcare funded. Let's get defense funded. And the ball is really in Thune and Republicans' court there. And then in terms of what Democrats are starting to push for, you're seeing there's not an official position yet, but you're starting to see a lot of coalescing around things that are very law and order focused and very accountability focused. So it's things along the lines of what we talked about last week. It's forcing ICE officers to adhere to standard warrants and actually get warrants instead of just do random grabs. It's wear body cameras, it's ditch the masks, it's have clear use of force standards. And I think a big one and one of the more contentious ones may be that they have to cooperate with state and local law enforcement to investigate incidents like the Pretti shooting and the Good shooting. That's not, you're not hearing abolish ICE rhetoric. You're not hearing, I think long term, you'll see Democrats talk about what their vision for enforcement is and how you need to do a top to bottom overhaul of ICE. Not the first time I think we've mentioned them. Third Way has some really good ideas out on that today that point out what that could look like. And I think those are the types of things you're going to see Democrats pushing for as they start to figure out how we can move forward on DHS and generally climb out of this mess.
Well, Ryan, thanks very much for your history making repeat appearance,
Mm.
and kind of walking us through what's, again, I think there's been a major shift, major change in Democrats' position, major change in Republicans' position, and really a major change in the way voters and the public are perceiving this. You see it starting to show up in polling. And so thanks for keeping us abreast of everything happening in DC behind the scenes. And I'll see you soon. The next time I get a text from you though, man, I'm going to be nervous because like every time you text me, it's like, oh boy, something.
I'll send an emoji first so you can gird yourself.
All right. That sounds
as
great.
a preview.
All right, man.
All right.
We'll get you out of here. All right. Well, let's do a baton handoff here and welcome in one of my favorite recurring guests, although not as recent a recurring guest as Ryan McConaghy. Mark Jacob, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's always delightful and insightful to have you. I want to start off with your most recent piece on Substack. You are a must subscribe. I know it's easy to say that, but truly you bring an expertise and a perspective that very few can claim on Substack or anywhere else when it comes to evaluating what the media is doing. So it's really invaluable, and I appreciate it. You wrote that over the course of the 48 hours that ensued after the murder of Alex Pretti, the New York Times did relatively well. And that's surprising because you've had plenty of criticism for them and they've earned it over the years. What did they do well?
Well, they actually, believe their eyes, and what you get in a lot of media is, number one, and this was kind of one of the main points of that piece of the Stop the Press's newsletter, was that news media is used to believing officials. They're used to believing the official story. They're used to giving it credit. I mean, and there's rational reason for that. It's people who have been elected or who have been appointed through a democratic process. So you would think they would have some credibility. But what you've seen clearly in the last decade is a political party that just lies all the time. And many, and since Trump came back into office, the Department of Homeland Security has routinely lied about everything. They've lied. I live in Chicago, and when they were doing their mayhem here, they were just, you could just count on a lie every time there was an incident. They would never just straight up tell the truth. They got the federal judge here found as part of the finding in the court case that they had lied, that Bovino had lied. And so, when the Pretti shooting happened, one of the first things I did is go on Blue Sky and say, "Dear news media, please, if you're going to mention anything that Homeland Security says, say that they lie routinely. Say that, put it in context." And this is, I've written about this a couple times, that, and I view it as my radically truthful policy for how the news media should operate, which means that if you're going to quote somebody who is a serial liar, you ought to, just for context, say, that so-and-so said something, according to this person who has lied frequently on this issue, or whose claims have in the past been debunked. In some way, because if you don't, what you're doing is what the news media does all the time, which is know that they're lying and that they always lie, but just assume that just this once they might be telling the truth. So we've got to give them an equal shake, as if we've erased our memory and we have no memory what they do.
I want to actually engage with 3 comments that came in back to back in the chats, and I'm going to do them kind of in reverse order. And because I think they lead to several important points. The first one that I'm going to put up is from @legs56, referring to Renee Good, saying she was a paid protester. Now, this is an example of the type of comment that I generally don't display, and I generally kind of ban, because it's a lie. That is false. That is not true. That is made up. And it's a falsehood that is intentional and insidious. It is meant to distort our perceptions. It is. Now, look, Legs56 is probably a bot or a troll bot. But I make this distinction by way of saying that I have no problem whatsoever engaging with people who want to make arguments, who want to use evidence, or who want to make argumentation free of evidence, but assertions that are reasonable, with which reasonable people can disagree.
Sure.
That's not what this is. What this is the type of bullshit that our administration engages in. That brings me to my second point, a comment from Lefty Gramps, who I deeply enjoy interacting with in all forms, including on the live stream. Lefty points out, they choose their words so carefully, quote, by which I assume you mean the media, the New York Times.
That's what he's talking about. The whole contradicted.
Right. The statements are contradicted by the video evidence. This is like Bill Belichick. It's like, I misinterpreted the rules when I deflated the footballs. Yes, the statements are contradicted by the video evidence. I was actually going to bring that up. Lefty, you read my freaking mind. I was going to bring this up with Mark. This is a form of very polite euphemism that drives me up the fucking wall, but I haven't come up with a better alternative to it. And finally, I just want to quickly splash up a comment from Robert Burdick 1057 saying both parties lie to play on people's feelings. This is why I don't care no more. And I want to say that this is the type of comment that I'm happy to have.
Mm-hmm.
It is it's a legitimate point. It might be a bot troll as well. I don't know, Robert. You could be, you might be real. I don't care. The point is, but this is a reasonable point. And I would like to say, yes, that's true. You can see lies from politicians of all stripes.
Yep.
But what's different is intentional, insidious, malicious lying at this scale from the people who are in charge, in authority, in power, meant to completely distort our perception of reality. That is not even hidden. All right, I just threw a whole bunch of stuff. Pick your
well, yes, people lie on both sides of the aisle and all that, but it's really not. It's not, the total button is not equal on each side. I mean, clearly you have a party in power now who makes it their policy to lie. I mean, they reflexively lie. They think, to them, that's just like, knocking on doors and handing out literature and putting up yard signs. Lying is one of the things they do. It's one of the things that they think is part of the whole political system. And the real insidious way that kind of attaches to the American mindset is this idea that everyone lies, and that therefore you can't believe anything. And I've long thought that the main goal of MAGA fascism is not to make you believe them, it's to make you believe nothing. It's to get you to where you just say, well, I don't know what the truth is. I don't care. I'm going to go sit on my couch and watch, soccer all day. And I just don't give a crap anymore. And they want you to not give a crap anymore. And so it's a very insidious way to just undermine the whole concept of truth. You have this stupid CBS News thing with Bari Weiss. They were saying, well, we need to have more respect for the opinions of regular people. Well, no, you need to actually find good experts who actually know things and quote them. That's what you need to do. You don't need to go find some guy on the street and ask him about vaccines, some guy who might not know anything. But the whole thing is, that's a two-part thing. They want you to think that everything's an opinion, and there are no such things as facts, and that they want you to think all opinions are equally legitimate. And so these are all ways that right-wing disinformation is eroding the whole idea of shared facts in a democracy. And if you don't have shared facts in a democracy, you can't have a democracy. So this is how they're just kind of eroding and undermining the very premise of our government. And man, I want to get back to the question I didn't answer that you first asked about New York.
Sure, yes.
The New York Times.
And then I threw so much more stuff at you.
I know.
It's like a Ponzi scheme of questions.
There's a lot to talk about. The New York Times, what they did is looked at the video. And this is, just think of how many cops got away, and a lot of people got away with bad acts before video. And video has been revolutionary in exposing the facts of what happens, and really kind of undermining this kind of the lies. And that's the thing that was so amazing in this Alex Pretti thing. is that you had really clear video showing exactly what happened. I mean, you could just analyze it and see what happened. Yet you had Kristi Noem standing up there and Greg Bovino and just telling you that, well, what you saw with your lion eyes isn't true. It didn't happen. And often the really exasperating thing is often in that kind of case, you get this media report where they go real generic, like 37-year-old man shot by federal agents. And that's all they say in the headline. And, and then they say, well, there were conflicting reports. They love conflicting reports. I mean, it's very safe to have conflicting reports. And sometimes it is true. I mean, I'm not like saying that you can always know exactly what happened. But in this case, you've got video that's been verified. And another thing you're getting in from Minneapolis, and you got this with the Renee Good thing too, is that you have multiple videos. So in effect, one is confirming the other, and the third one confirms the first two. So it's not one of those things where, oh, somebody faked this. No, because you have different citizens in different angles shooting the same thing. It's incredibly powerful as far as when you're trying to get to the truth. And so the New York Times, but another thing about video that needs to be really thought about by the news media is that it can be faked in this era of AI. So you better have a staff of people who can analyze video and can detect doctoring of video, and New York Times has that. They've made a commitment to have that, and so when something like this happens, they put their folks on it and they take it apart, and they did it very quickly on Saturday, and that's why they were able to say, that video contradicts Homeland Security's story or appears to contradict. Problem is, they said appears to contradict for a very long time, and finally they went to video contradicts, which is so they were inching closer to the facts. But they said it in their headlines. Their headlines were like, let me see if I can find them. They were talking about, the man killed by federal agents was holding a phone, not a gun. That was one of their headlines, which is a giant advance over the way these kinds of things are normally handled by the mainstream media. And then they did the old, videos appear to contradict federal accounts of fatal shooting, got rid of finally the appears to and just said it contradicts. And they've been really at it. And some other news agencies have been pretty good too. CNN has been good. You still had the most interesting thing, Matt, to me, one of the most interesting is how, obviously Fox News wants to lie in concert with the Trump administration. They want to, sometimes they're driving the lie and the Trump administration jumps along, or sometimes it's the other way around. And so as soon as this happened, the Pretti thing happened, Fox News was all over it, just jumping on it. And the one thing they could really jump on was the fact that Pretti had a gun, which was just a giant ironic thing that the right wing is saying, look at this citizen holding a legal gun. What is he doing? Or not even holding it, having it in a holster. Having a legal gun. We can't have people, carrying guns around in our society. So they ended up, in this ridiculous position for the right, but that's where they were. And so they were, pounding on their message. And so I'd say about a day and a half, Fox News was, in concert with the Trump administration on this whole thing. But then it started falling apart. Because people saw how ridiculous it was. They watched the video. They knew that he wanted to massacre law enforcement. They said, that's a direct quote, massacre law enforcement. Well, they watched the guy like directing traffic, and then he sees this woman getting shoved to the ground and pepper sprayed and goes to help her. It really doesn't look like a plot to massacre law enforcement to any normal person. It just became
insane.
The problem for Fox News and the Trump administration was that their lie became so exposed by objective fact that they just that they couldn't even spin it for their own benefit. And the only spin they found was he's holding a gun, or he's not even he's holding a gun. He shouldn't bring a gun to something like this, when they are the ones that have been pushing for decades to have laws that say you can take a gun to things like this.
Right. That's exactly how Kyle Rittenhouse felt. Don't bring a gun to a
Right.
protest. Exactly.
And you know, frankly, I think you should not bring a gun to a protest. I think
Probably
it's a bad
not a
idea.
good idea.
No, not a good idea.
Not with these idiots running around.
Right.
But that's another
But
story.
it's
That's another
legal.
story.
It's legal, and it's what they and they've been pushing for that. So suddenly it's the only thing they can cling to. So they're going to push like that. And you've got Trump. Even today, Trump is like talking about, well, you can't have a gun. You can't have a gun. That's a direct quote. You can't have a gun. This is Mr. Second Amendment who ran on that is now like this. And the whole truth of it is that it was always going to be this way, that when somebody wants to be a dictator, the first thing they want to do is come for the guns. So he's like uses the gun issue to try to get right wingers to support him. They do support him. He gets into power and he wants to be a dictator, obviously. And so he's going to go, he'll be a gun grabber before it's all over if he succeeds.
Yeah, well,
gun
grabber is the best of the things that he likes grabbing. I want to hit on the point that you just led to, because I want to ask you if what we're seeing is fundamentally different when it comes to lying. This is like the Olympics of lying, and we've surpassed bronze, silver, and gold, and we need a new medal. We need a platinum medal for what's happening now. I do want to get to that. I want to quickly just shout out, first of all, Lefty Gramps, slight disagreement with you. The thing they fear most is a black liberal with a gun. I would say that's number one for them. However, I will concede most of your point. I also, because I promised earlier that I am fine to engage with dissenting points of view, I just want to splash up here. Michael, just 3477. Okay, legitimate question. You take your child swimming. You say adults jumping off a bridge with rocks on both sides of where they land. Do you encourage your child to go jump? I'm very sorry, because you're prefacing this with a legitimate question. I have to say, I'm not sure I understand it. Come back in the chat and cycle it back, and I will try and get to what you're saying. And finally, I want to point out, I'm not sure if Glenn Lowry 984 is a bot or is trying to make a pro-Trump or anti-Trump or a pro-ICE or anti-ICE sentiment, but he's saying Das Boot is what we're giving these illegal immigrants, to which I just want to say, first of all, Das Boot is an amazing movie that everyone should definitely invest 3.5 hours in watching Jürgen Prochnow in. And second
maybe
of all,
he thinks it's about boots or something. I mean, he may not realize it's about.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, dude, you realize that this is about Nazis, right? Like, you do get this. Are you being ironic intentionally? I don't think you are. I'm just not sure you are. Okay, so back to your point. We're seeing something different in my mind, but maybe it's not different in your mind. It's like, I don't even have, as a writer, I'm struggling to find the words for it. Gaslighting on steroids, super gaslighting. I don't, you have administration officials issuing statements, sometimes with video literally playing at the same time in front of them that is contradicting their lies.
Right.
Contradicted by video evidence. This literally happened. I need to put this up on the Worth Knowing YouTube channel, which I have now, by the way. Hope people subscribe. There was this amazing YouTube short, a New York Times interview where Donald Trump was being interviewed by the New York Times, and a staffer stepped forward to play the Renee Good video. And it contradicted his lies in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening with Kristi Noem. It's happening with Caroline Leavitt. You have, here's a weird out of left field example. You have Kevin Hassett being trotted out to give obviously nonsensical statements for anyone of his level of intelligence, like tariffs on Denmark over Greenland are emergencies, and that's legal. It's under the president's emergency tariff authority because they help avoid the emergency that we would be in if we didn't put on a tariff to stop us from invading them.
It's an emergency to stop an emergency, to prevent an emergency.
It's
right, which under that kind of standard, you could do anything, and anything would be an emergency because it would stop whatever emergency that you imagined in your head.
Right. If I don't know, blow up this bank, that will prevent me from going and robbing it.
Right. Well, it's an overused word, but this is all very Orwellian. I mean, this is really, it's nonsensical. You're not supposed to make it make sense. It's just supposed to drive you nuts the more you think about it till you stop thinking about it. And that's part of the goal. And I got to say that I think you're right about the Olympics of lying and how, if they had an Olympics of lying, the people in the White House would, they'd be winning all the gold medals. I feel like they lie outrageously on purpose. Even like beyond anything that anyone could actually believe to some extent, because I think that to some extent it's performative lying to show loyalty to the dictator. And so if they are willing to make themselves look foolish by defending things that are completely indefensible, the dictator sees it on TV and loves it. And it's a sign of loyalty. It's a loyalty test to some extent. I just think that they got too far away from the actual facts over the weekend with the Alex Pretti shooting, to where it wasn't just an absurd misinterpretation of what's happening. It was like totally on a different planet. I mean, it was just so far away that any normal person would say, these people are lying to me.
I am just responding to a chat to Zunny Og never left. You left her. Dude, I'm sorry. This is a great handle. This is maybe the best handle I've ever seen, but it is a little long. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Where is Cliff? I am the Tuesday Cliff. I am your Tuesday Cliff. I'm Matt Robeson. That's how you spell my name for everyone trying to make up shit about Matt Robinson. That's just so you know, that's the spelling of my name. So get it right. I host on Tuesdays. This is Cliff's Edge YouTube channel. Cliff, you can get on Wednesdays, and you can subscribe to his Substack at Blue Amp, and you can get all of his stuff. Okay. Boy, I'm so far behind in the chats. So, all right. I'm going to push you on something that you've advised before, which is the sandwich method. And you kind of referred to it before, because what I want to get at is, how do you deal with this? Like,
right.
You've given a prescription for the ailment of, you have an E. coli infection. You have a staph infection. What we have here is MRSA. What we have here is antibiotic resistant, like media sandwich method resistant media bullshit, right?
The treatments we have are not working.
They're not working. So now we need like chemo level treatments. And just to backtrack for a second, by the sandwich method, what I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is you want to sandwich administration statements from known, repeated, deplorable liars with, this is a known liar. Here is what they said, but just a reminder, it's probably bullshit, or it is demonstrably bullshit.
Right. Well, yes, it's that you, instead of giving the lie the last word, because people tend to remember the last thing they heard, what you do is you say, Donald Trump made a number of misstatements about the economy today. And then you go into his quote, he says things that are wrong. And then after that, you say what was actually true and what he got wrong. And therefore you have used, the start and the finish to sandwich his lie. And another thing, Matt, and I've been writing about this too, there's no obligation to continue to put liars on television. I mean,
that's not in the Constitution.
No, it's not. The First Amendment, I read it the other day, and it didn't have anything about your obligation to keep nodding and smiling as people lie to your audience, and then thanking them after they finish, and then inviting them back the next week to lie again some more. That's not in the Constitution. I kind of thought it must be because TV people do it all the time. So, but no. It's not in there. They don't have to be doing that. They just are doing that because they're obsessed with access. It's the access thing, which I also rant about a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, does the sandwich method work against MRSA? I guess is the question. Do we need something even? Because I like your idea of.
But the reason I brought it up, Matt, the reason I brought it up at this point in time was that you don't even have to do the sandwich if you've just decided you're lying. I'm stopping this interview with you right now, and I'm not inviting you back. Goodbye. See you. Leave the studio.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to do the sandwich method. Then you just go find somebody who's not a liar and interview them. So I mean, with the president of the United States, yes, you're in the news business. You got to report what they say. I get that, but you don't. But there are a lot of people who you don't have to have them on television all the time if all they do is lie to your audience.
Exactly. And this is your point is exactly the approach I try to take. We are a show. We are on today's TV. This is what TV is now these days.
Mhm.
And this is how I try to engage with. I want people to disagree and make arguments that are respectful. This is what I do on my Friday show with Republican consultant Matt Wiley. We look at the news and we have areas we disagree and we do it respectfully. And it's that's how I think people should engage. I don't think people should engage like Glenn Damn C6040 troll, sorry, bot, sorry, whatever you are, saying these two are results of what happens when men take estrogen. I just want to say that last week, someone commented, I like your homosexual t-shirt, which is like, what are you saying? I don't understand. Is it that my t-shirt likes other t-shirts that are similar in cut and color? Okay. I like
this reminds me of another, column I wrote in my newsletter series just about a couple months ago, which is, that toxic masculinity is a giant problem, and that you have a lot of people who are the most insecure men in the world are saying mean things in the media because they think that makes, they're compensating for something, Matt. I don't know what it is.
Precisely. I mean, I look, I if anyone would like to meet me and we can check how much we bench, I'm up for that. Like, come on, bro. Let's hang out. And you could spot me. I'll spot you. It's cool. Unless you won't do that with my homosexual t-shirt. That might be a non-starter. All right, look, we've got to wrap. I want to get to, boy, I missed so many amazing comments here. I missed MJ calling bullshit on Gen 6 and move back to kissing the fat, dependent, psychotic toddler's ass. Listen, I know I'm not a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And I said that I tend not to like abusive comments. On the other hand, I've got control here, and I'm going to abuse it just a little bit because I adore MJ and I happen to agree with her.
Well, actually, MJ makes a really good point, which is that you're getting Republicans, are so upset about the ICE murdering people in the street, and they're expressing their deep concerns and all that crap. They did that after, January 6th too. And then 2 weeks later, they were back on board the bandwagon. So I am very interested to see where all these Republicans are going to be 2 weeks from now, because I think
100%
to a large extent, I think they like to get past the bad moments and then continue to do the same horrible stuff they always do.
100%. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Denise 2003 J's very perceptive point. The only problem is that Alex wasn't at a protest. He was monitoring activity in his neighborhood.
Right.
Spot on.
Right.
Great point. So
totally right.
just to circle back, we have agreed, like, look, if you're going to a protest, maybe just choose. It's your right, but maybe just choose, given these yahoos that work for ICE. Maybe that's not the time to open carry, but that's not what Alex.
Right. And it's Alex's neighborhood. It's not ICE's neighborhood. It's Alex's neighborhood. Yes. And so that's a great comment. I 100% agree with that.
And finally, I can't help it with the troll. Salty Spotted Dog says, you two commentators are very transparent with the ignorance of the left. Well, you English, good, Salty Spotted Dog. Also, I have to say, you can see me. I'm not transparent. I mean, fuck it. I'm here.
You're not translucent, at least.
But I will open a book, you clown. All right. I'm constantly accused. This is the one I'm reading right now, Passage of Power. Just the best thing. Oh, gosh. Robert Caro is a genius. I'm constantly accused of having a background here. I'll put this down. Of having a background that is not real. It's real. I just took a real book from it. All right. Mark Jacob. It's always insightful, always interesting. I'm going to splash up one more time your Substack. It's really a must read. I really, truly hope, just take the time. You know what? You don't have to read every single email that comes in your inbox unless it's from me, but this one is worth it. Stop the presses. And it adds a lot to my understanding of what's going on in the world. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll just say to everybody, look, this has been an exceptionally rough week. This has been an exceptionally rough time in America. This is really, really hard stuff. And I really appreciate people being together here, even if it's just a vent a little bit, get some things off their chest. If you don't agree with us, but you're willing to not be a troll and be generally constructive, even if you have differing viewpoints, I'm glad you're hanging out. I appreciate you. And for everyone out there, please stay safe, be well, be careful amidst the rough weather out there and the rough federal government out there. And we will see everybody next week.